This week in Billionaires, pop superstar Taylor Swift and Super Bowl champion Travis Kelce are officially engaged, combining her massive $1.6 billion fortune with his still impressive $70 million net worth. From a friendship bracelet to a stunning $650,000 diamond ring, this power couple's love story is now worth a combined $1.67 billion. Next up, thanks to a massive crypto bonanza, Eric Trump briefly joined the Billionaires Club after his company, American Bitcoin, saw its shares skyrocket on its market debut. His personal stake soared to an estimated $950 million at its peak, putting him above $1 billion along with his other assets, including homes and cash. He and his brother, Don Jr., are also expanding the family's business empire through international licensing deals and other financial ventures. Finally, from Grand Slam champion to business titan, tennis legend Roger Federer has officially aced his way into the Billionaires Club with an estimated net worth of $1.1 billion. His massive fortune was built not just on nearly $131 million in career prize money, but through lucrative endorsements and a game-winning investment in the Swiss shoe brand On, where his stake is worth over $375 million. And for our main story this week, the Forbes list of the 400 richest Americans launches today, September 9th, 2025. These billionaires are worth a record $6.6 trillion collectively. And today, we'll break down the numbers. Welcome to Beyond the Billions, a new show where we'll dig into the fortunes and finances of the world's wealthiest people. I'm Giacomo Tognini, a staff writer on the wealth team at Forbes, and joining me today are my colleagues Matt Durot and Chase Peterson-Withorn, editors on the wealth team, who have put together and edited the Forbes list of the 400 richest Americans. Matt and Chase, welcome.
Thanks, Giacomo.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So, we've all worked together on this list for many years now, but for our viewers, could you tell us a little bit more about, what is the Forbes 400 and how do you get on the list?
Yeah, so the Forbes 400 is our ranking of the richest 400 people in America. So how you get on the list is you have to be very, very, very rich. There can't be more than 399 people richer than you. And this year, that means you have to have $3.8 billion to rank among the top 400 in America, which is up $500 million from last year, 500 million, which is a really crazy one-year jump. So it's hard to make the list.
And I remember even a few years ago, we were at like 3.2 billion, 3.1. What are sort of the biggest takeaways that you both have from this year in terms of the record numbers we're seeing in terms of the growth of this wealth in the US?
Yeah, just the numbers are staggering. Billionaires are doing insanely well, as you mentioned. The cutoff's up, 500 million since last year to a record 3.8 billion dollars. And nearly everyone is richer than they were, last year. And it's maybe the industries you might expect that are leading the way. I think nearly 60% of the list came either from the tech sector or the finance sector. So they've both, continued to do very, very well.
So, let's get into it. People will want to know who's at the top. So, Chase, can you run us through who's at the top of the list? Who's the richest in America right now, and what does that sort of top 10 ranking look like?
Yeah, so the very top of the list is Elon Musk. He's been on the top of the list for many years now.
Right.
He's worth $428 billion this year. First time anybody's ever been worth more than $400 billion on the Forbes 400. And the reasons for that are, Tesla stock is up more than 50% over the past year. The valuation of SpaceX just keeps going up and up. Even Twitter, which was a bad investment at the time. Even Musk himself said it was a bad investment at the time.
Right.
He sort of managed to dig himself out of that hole. He merged it with his AI company, XAI. It's this crazy valuation. So wild year for Elon Musk, personally, professionally. He was in the government. He was out of the government. He was a friend of Trump's. He was feuding with Trump. And despite all of that, he's gotten much, much richer. So it's yet again the year of Elon Musk.
Yeah, I feel like there's been so much Elon news, but one thing that hasn't changed is he's stayed at the top, right? As the richest person in the US. Matt, you mentioned,
yeah.
Go ahead, Chase.
No, I was just going to say, he's just so much richer than even Jeff Bezos. I think the difference in their net worth is something like the entire net worth of Warren Buffett. So it's hard to lose
Wow.
the top spot when you have such a big lead.
Yeah, when you have a whole buffet in between you and the next
Yeah.
person. I mean, all the people that you mentioned, Chase, are in tech, obviously. Matt, you were talking about some of the industries and how 60%, I believe, is in tech. Can you tell me a bit more about the breakdown of that industry? What other industries are at the top and are providing the most billionaires on this list?
Yeah, sure. So not only did the incredible percentage of the list come from tech and finance, but those two sectors just on a dollar basis saw some pretty staggering gains. I think, the tech billionaires are up like 700 billion since last year, and the
Wow.
finance billionaires are up, more than 160 billion dollars, I believe. And so, like, it wasn't just those two industries that did well. Most did, with the one exception being manufacturing, which, again, Trump, his tariffs hurt that sector this year. So that was sort of an outlier in a year where pretty much everyone else did well.
And what other kinds of trends are we seeing? I mean, obviously, we track who's self-made and who isn't. We track industries. If we're looking at sort of the overall breakdown of this list, we talked about tech, we talked about the richest. What are the other important takeaways you have in terms of the trends that have changed maybe from last year to this year? Obviously, we've seen a change in administration, the other changes we've talked about, but what else stood out to you, Chase?
Yeah, I think that the story of tech is definitely one of the big stories, and particularly the AI subset of tech.
Of
Uh,
course.
we've been talking about this for the last couple of years now, but the AI frenzy is definitely still booming. The bubble has not burst yet, and there are a lot of AI billionaires that are on the list, joining the list. So I think that's a big one. The other thing is that the list over time is just getting more and more self-made. So
Hmm.
last year it was something like 67% of the Forbes 400 was self-made. This year the numbers climbed to 71%, which is
Wow.
might be a record. I mean, it's way up there. So as you see these family fortunes, these inherited fortunes dissipate over time, you see very wealthy people pass away, and their fortunes sort of get spread. They're really being replaced by a lot of people who built their fortunes on their own.
And, you know, we've talked about the self-made in tech. Obviously, the US is a big country, right? There's going to be geographic concentration.
Yeah.
I imagine people might think that California, Texas, Florida, New York, the biggest states will have the most people, but
Yep.
can you tell us how that actually breaks down on the list this year?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess probably no surprise. You know, I guess one surprise is that California overtook Japan to become the fourth largest economy in the world
Hmm.
this year. So they're once again, for I believe the 35th straight year, the state that produced the most billionaires on the Forbes 400. And then the top four, as you mentioned, the four most populous states have remained pretty static for a number of years, but there has been some moving and shaking in there. Florida actually tied New York last year
Hmm.
for the first time ever in the two spot, but they dropped back to three again this year. A bunch of high profile billionaires moved to Florida last year, like Jeff Bezos and Ken Griffin. I think was a big part of what prompted, last year's increase. And so I think, you know, primarily just fluctuations in net worths explained this year. And then Texas, yep, rounds out the top four. And, Elon Musk accounts for nearly half that
Hmm.
state's wealth, amazingly. Um, you know, ever since pretty much he moved there in 2020 after, moving from California. And, I think he was feuding with the governor over the state's COVID restrictions, and that kind of sent him on his way. So a lot of wealth has moved from California to Texas as a result of that.
Yeah, and it's kind of fascinating how, we've been hearing, right, since COVID of this migration from California down south, from New York to Florida, and we've seen that play out with America's richest, but California's still staying number one, right? I presume also with new billionaire fortunes being created there and new people joining the list. Are there any big surprises you have for this year? I mean, obviously, as the cutoff gets higher and higher, it becomes harder to even make the list, right? You could be worth 3.6 billion come out of nowhere and still not be wealthy enough. But are there any surprises in terms of the biggest, newcomers you've seen or anyone who dropped off and came back? Chase, anyone that you would want to point out?
Yeah, I think that the most surprising things to me are of course, just the sheer numbers of it. You mentioned the cutoff being so high, the total wealth being 6.6 trillion, and that's 1.2 trillion more than a year ago. So, it was more than $1 trillion a year for these 400 billionaires. So I think that's really, um, it's hard to sort of understate how dramatic, I guess, those numbers are. So I think that's one thing that's really interesting. I think the AI boom is definitely really interesting. The other thing is just that even with the cutoff being so high, with the list being so hard to get on, 14 people still managed to make the list for the first time. 14 newcomers, and 4 of them are worth more than $10 billion. So there are still massive fortunes being minted very quickly. The richest, newcomer is this guy, Edwin Chen of, Surge AI. He's also 37 years old, so he's also the youngest person on the list. So the list is getting richer. It's getting harder to get onto. It's getting, older. I think something like 90% of the list this year was on the list last year. If you make the Forbes 400, it's pretty difficult to get off of it. Wealth begets wealth. And so it's pretty hard to drop off. But even still, there are these young sort of newcomers who are joining still at very huge numbers, and probably will be on this list for a very long time to come.
Wait, who are those newcomers that joined at 10 billion?
We have Edwin Chen.
Mm-hmm.
Hold on one second. Let me actually pull it up.
Yeah, so Adam Pierogi is the co-founder and CEO of this marketing software and mobile games company called App11, which
the stock's been on a tear, right?
Yeah, and it's yeah. I would challenge you to find someone who can explain really well what they do. But it's created 8 billionaires, 3 of whom are newcomers to the Forbes 400. And I was going to piggyback off what Chase was saying. And another interesting thing about the group of 14 newcomers is that 7 of them come from 3 companies. So it's 3 from App11, 2 from this liquefied natural gas exporter called Venture Global,
which went public earlier this year.
Yeah.
Right?
And then another similar situation with a cloud computing company called CoreWeave. So that was interesting to me. Another, I guess, I don't know if you would call it a surprise, but I guess disappointing trend is that the number of women on the list, which was already small, I think it was 17% last year, is down to closer to 15%. You'd maybe expect it to be moving in the other direction. So I guess we'll see if that is a sort of one-off thing or not. But yeah.
It's interesting how there's been all this talk about sort of fewer IPOs, right? But then CoreWeave and the other firm you mentioned in the LNG, that sort of had a direct impact in creating these new fortunes that are now in the 400. And I was also curious to ask, piggybacking off what you said, Chase, about Edwin Chen and Serge, is the list getting any younger? Like, what's the age breakdown right now? If he's the youngest at 37, what's the overall makeup? I imagine most of these folks are pretty old, as I know from working on this list too with you guys, but yeah.
As you know, this is a list of primarily men, primarily older men, primarily older white men. Like Matt just said, there are actually fewer women on this year's list than last year, although they are much richer. The ones who are on the list are much richer than a year ago. But yeah, I think the average age is something like 70. But the youngest, 10 are all under the age of 43. So you do have a lot of people in their 40s, certainly in their 50s and 60s, a few in their 30s. And the list stretches all the way up to, we have a couple 96-year-olds on the list. So it mostly skews older, but there are a lot of young fortunes being minted.
And if we're looking at sort of the people who have dropped off from last year, who are the most notable faces that we don't see, either if they passed away or sort of from a change in the fortunes of their company? Because I'm also curious in terms of the percentage of women being lower this year. Is that just a matter of the cutoff got higher and so they dropped below? What's sort of behind that, and what's happening with the drop-offs?
Yeah. In terms of the women going down, I think a big contributor to that was the fact that all 14 of the newcomers were men, so that didn't help. And then, so there were, sorry, I'm having to reference my computer here.
No, there's a lot of data. Have at it. Go
a lot of data.
It's all good.
So 26 people from last year's list fell off, and another 10 died. One of the 10 that died was Judy Love, who, with her late
Hmm.
husband, founded Love's Travel Shops. If you're on a cross-country road trip, you may have come across one of those. Another of the people who died was one of the Campbell Soup's heirs, by the name of, Chase, help me out here.
Mary
Mary
Alice
Alice
Dorrance
Dorrance
Malone.
Malone.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's a
say
lot
it
of
all.
airs. It's hard
One,
to
two, three.
remember.
Say it at the same time.
Yeah, yeah.
And in terms of the drop off, some of the bigger names were William Wrigley Jr., who's
Mhm.
from the famous chewing gum family. Travis Kalanick, the Uber founder, and then both of or two of the three Fertitta billionaires.
Mhm.
So Frank and Lorenzo Fertitta, who uh, sold the UFC, is how they made their money primarily, and now they are the largest shareholders of Red Rocks Resorts, which their father he founded the predecessor, and they've built it.
Mhm.
So their cousin, uh, Tillman Fertitta,
Mhm.
sorry, who's the ambassador to Italy now, is
Yeah.
still on the list.
One thing that's interesting too is that of these drop-offs, most of them are richer than they were last year. Few of them got poorer. The stock in their public companies have tanked, or something like that. But most of them actually did get richer. It's just that they didn't get richer enough, and so they got surpassed by other people who, maybe they went from 3.3 billion to 3.7, but 3.7 is not enough. So some of them had a $400 million year and ended up booted from the Forbes 400. So it's tough competition
Yeah.
out there.
I mean, it's wild. I mean, this is the 44th edition, right? And I think back in the first edition, the vast majority were not even billionaires. And now we're at a point where you can add a billion or a few hundred million to your fortune and you're going to drop off, right? And
Yeah,
I
and
guess this,
even a decade ago, 3.8 billion would have put you well into the top half of
yeah,
the Forbes 400. You would have ranked,
Yeah.
150th or something. And now you're just barely clinging to stay on.
right. I remember when I first started working with you guys on the list, it was in the twos, right? I forget where, but below 3 billion for sure. And now we're inching up towards four.
100
And
million back in 1982.
yeah,
So
different
I think there
times, right?
were
Yeah.
like about two dozen or so billionaires back then. So
I don't know that
380 of the people on the Forbes 400 were not billionaires.
I don't know that we even be able to track all of the 100 millionaires in the
Yeah,
list right now. I mean,
yeah,
but I think it is interesting to see. We talk about these people who have gotten richer and still can't make it on. What about folks who are returning? Maybe they weren't on last year or the year before, but they've had a change in their fortunes literally and are now back on. Who are the most interesting returnees that we've seen this year?
yeah. It's sort of interesting, how much when we talk about the cutoff, like $100 million can make with these lists,
Hmm.
because when you look at Robinhood, it's got two co-founders, one
Hmm.
of whom, Vlad Tenev, who's probably the more publicly recognizable of the two co-founders,
Right.
is a newcomer this year, whereas his co-founder Baiju Bhatt is actually a returnee. So he made it 1 year previously during 2021. So Tenev must have just barely missed the list back then.
Right. At the peak of sort of the Robin Hood mania at the time, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And then, talk about sort of the crypto boom and bust and boom again. The Winklevoss twins are big names, probably the two other biggest names that returned to the list this year. And so they've, I think, been in the news because one of their companies is supposed to be gearing up for an IPO in the sort of near future. So I guess we'll have to, wait and see what happens with that.
So I mean, we've broken down the list a bunch of different ways. Obviously, readers and viewers can get on the Forbes website and dig into it for themselves, and all of the articles we'll have going out breaking down the list in different ways. But Chase, you've been doing this for a while now. This is not your first time doing the Forbes 400. It won't be your last. But what have you found particularly interesting about this list this year? And obviously, it's been a tumultuous year, a lot going on. But what is really, apart from everything we've talked about, what was the most interesting thing for you in reporting, editing, and covering it this year?
Yeah, I think that this year's Forbes 400 really speaks to the point in time that we're at. So you've got tariff threats,
Right.
denting global outlooks, the global outlook on growth. You've got inflation still sticking around. you've got a lot of companies tightening their belts and sort of you know, bracing for, you know, there's certainly talk of recession, all this talk of, you know, the economic slowdown and all of that. And yet the stock market is higher than it's ever been.
Hmm.
And so these billionaires who are the, you know, faces of the stock market and the, you know, the run all of these companies that make up the stock market are just doing better than ever, you know, and so there isn't any, you know, real belt tightening or economic slowdown, at least in their personal net worths. You know, they're definitely thriving. So I think it really just speaks to just how successful the economy is doing from a stock market standpoint, at least. You know, that you just see these billionaires getting so unbelievably rich, even when they started from a place of being unbelievably rich.
Right. I mean, we saw that big dip after the tax liberation day, right? And then it's just come roaring back since then. I mean, Matt, same question for you. What have you found particularly interesting about it this year?
Yeah. I guess that it's, increasingly becoming, yeah, this public stock market is booming, as Chase said, but there's also these private companies like Elon Musk, SpaceX, and Stripe, and that are just becoming massive, and like, you know, really no sign of an IPO in the
Hmm.
near future. So just the ability of, a lot of these billionaires to accumulate massive wealth without having to take their companies public, or at least not as quickly as they would have had to in the past, is both interesting and, makes our job a little bit more challenging. But, you know, I guess it keeps us in a job too.
Yeah. More things to dig into rather than just looking at SEC
Exactly.
filings, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was interesting.
So I don't want to make you guys predict things a year ahead of time, but I think it's always interesting to see, where might we be next year. So without asking you to sort of make crazy forecasts, are there any people that you think would be good or interesting candidates who might sort of make it next year? Maybe they just missed the cutoff this year, and it looks like be getting wealthier. Any folks that you're looking at specifically that are ones to watch, I guess, is the way to put it for next year or over the next year. Matt, if you want to
Sure.
stuff.
I'm sure that we will continue to see more billionaires on the Forbes 400 from these privately held AI
Right.
startups. So actually, just a few days before we locked in the list, one of the biggest of those companies,
Hmm.
Anthropic, raised or did a huge new funding round that valued the company at over $100 billion. And so that boosted the net worths of seven of their co-founders, six of whom are American, to 3.7 billion. So they fell just $100 million short of the
So
cutoff.
close, yeah.
So if I had to guess, I would posit that they'll probably, be seen on the list next year if all continues to go well for that company. Um, Another, big name who fell just short was Dylan Field, who is the co-founder and CEO of Figma, which is a sort of graphic design company,
Another
which
big IPO this year, right? Like we were
had one of
talking
the
about,
bigger
yeah.
IPOs of this year, and he was at one point not too long ago worth over $6 billion, and so the company's stock has sort of sunk since then, and he just missed the cut. So I guess we'll have to see if he can rebound and get on the list next year. Um, those are big ones that come to my mind. What about you, Chase?
So I think that there are a lot of famous people who did not make the list, who are on their way. And so one that comes to my mind actually is Taylor Swift, who is pretty far from making the 400 right now, but she got $500 million richer last year. So she's going to keep touring. She's going to be in the news, and she's got a long, long way to go, many, many years of earnings. So I think you'll see some celebrities like that. I think you'll also eventually wouldn't be surprised if we see LeBron James join Michael Jordan, on the list. But it'll be a while before that happens. But there are some famous faces out there that are on their way.
And
Just
I imagine Taylor's going to get a prenup maybe before. I don't have any inside information, but if she wants to keep that fortune intact, right?
so I have to
I
do
think I think the
roughly,
prenup percentage on our billionaires list is pretty high.
Yeah.
yeah. I was just gonna say she'll have to do three or four more Eras tours probably to to make the list.
She's got time, you know. She'll get married maybe next year. Forbes 400 the next year after that. Who knows? We'll be tracking that.
Travis will have to play a few more years.
Well, it's been awesome chatting with you guys about the list today and toiling on it together with you for the last couple months. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, it was great to be on your new show. You're a natural.
Thanks for having us.
And if you want to dig into the Forbes 400 list and all the stories we talked about today, please check the description of the video. Thank you.